Today on the TMZ Podcast.
Welcome to the TMZ Podcast. Harvey, Levin here.
And Jason.
So Chris Rock is so smart that he didn't say a word about the Will Smith slap for almost a year. And everybody thought, why are you waiting? And now we know why he was waiting. Because the Academy Awards are coming up very soon. And people are starting to talk about the Academy Awards, talking about Will Smith. This is the perfect time for him to unload. And boy, did he.
Y'all know what happened to me, getting smacked by Suge Smith. Will Smith practices selective outrage. Because everybody knows what the fuck happened. Everybody that really knows I had nothing to do with that shit. I didn't have any entanglements. And then for people that don't know, and everybody knows, Will Smith and his wife was her son's friend, okay? Now, I normally would not talk about this shit. But for some reason, these put that shit on the internet. I have no idea why two talented people would do something that f***ing low down.
Well, he's the interesting thing to me is he is now leaning in not just to Will Smith, but to Jada.
I think more after Jada than Will, right? He was saying Jada was just, Will was just reacting to a situation that Jada had created. It is so brilliant. I mean, he is so brilliant. He waited the full year, to your point. Waits the full year. He builds up the suspense for it. He writes the exact special he wants to write. It takes him a long time to get it together. And then he comes out and he attacks her because everybody viewed it from the beginning as something that he did, not because Will Smith actually felt upset about it, because we all saw that he laughed in the immediate aftermath of the joke, then looks at Jada, then goes into his selective outrage.
So he's basically saying that Will Smith, you were a puppet, and she was the marionette.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. She is the marionette, and so he goes after the person, pulling the strings here.
And what's so interesting about it is Will Smith got supposedly the last word in at the Academy Awards, saying, "Keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth."
Yeah.
Well, guess what? It's back.
It's back in his mouth.
It's back in his mouth.
He said it over and over and over again.
Over and over and over again. And is he wrong?
No, he's not wrong. He's 100% right.
Of course he is.
He's wrong?
No, of course you're right. You're
okay.
right.
Oh, okay.
He's right.
Got it. Yeah.
Of course he is.
Yeah.
I mean, look, this guy, what Will Smith did was so outrageous. And again, I'm not saying this should define him. It certainly shouldn't cancel him. I hate that word. But look, what Will Smith did was it was criminal. What Will Smith did was criminal. He's lucky, but it was criminal. That's a crime.
But there can be crimes. Look,
that's a crime.
Agreed. No question about it. It's a crime. But sometimes somebody needs to punch somebody. And even if it's typically a crime, but sometimes it's warranted.
Is it warranted then?
But that is the key here. This is a joke. A comedian tells a joke on stage, and I can't stop saying that you, Will Smith, laughed at. You thought it was funny until you realized you weren't supposed to in the household find it's funny.
So this was almost performative on Will's part. It wasn't true outrage.
Fully performative.
It was totally performative.
Yep.
That makes it worse.
It absolutely makes it worse.
That
That's why
makes
I keep bringing it up.
So Will Smith, if Chris Rock is right, Will Smith thought it was funny. Then his wife gets all upset. He decides he needs to react appropriately for her, and then decides to engage in maybe the most outrageous conduct in the history of the Oscars.
Right. I don't know what number 2 is. The woman speaking for Marlon Brando, the streaker?
I don't think that comes close to this.
I agree. It was the most outrageous conduct that we've ever seen in any sort of an award show. It was criminal, to your point. It was also so childish. It was so performative. It was so
Well, that's the thing. It was performative. It wasn't real.
Yeah.
It wasn't real.
And you see, because he laughs hysterically at the joke.
Right.
And then looks at his wife. And clearly, Chris Rock had insulted Jada 4 or 5 years earlier.
And Will.
And
this was at the Oscars, and they hated him.
And they hated him. And that's okay, too. You can hate somebody.
Which is fine. They hated him,
Right.
and he clearly hates them.
Yes.
But I got to say, I mean, I like Jada, but I don't know on this one. How do you argue with Chris Rock on this.
We heard from her at all?
No,
we haven't.
not
In
really.
the last year, we've heard from Will a couple of times.
She
He's
had
apologized. Yeah.
She had this oblique comment
Yes,
about getting
that's right.
along and whatnot, but not anything direct.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see if she answers this. But I mean, look, everybody was talking about alopecia and that this was, it seems, at least from Chris's vantage point, all false.
Yeah.
Not that she didn't have it, and not that it's not a bad thing.
Right.
But that it would trigger something like that in Will. What triggered in Will, according to Chris Rock, was Jada, not alopecia.
According to Chris Rock, according to the video that we all saw with our own plain eyes here. And the other thing is, and I keep going back to this, what I said a year ago, Jada Smith is famously beautiful the way she looks. People talk about, like, she and Demi Moore, the most beautiful woman without hair in the history of Hollywood, right? She is incredibly beautiful and complimented for it all the time.
I'm going to argue.
Doesn't mean she's not sensitive to the condition.
I think that's the point. That you can say somebody is beautiful, but to them, if they feel like this disease is hampering the way they view their own self-image, that's real. It's all real. It's just that no matter how you feel, and again, if Will Smith really felt this was just the worst thing in the world and it was just such an abusive thing to say about his wife, it still wouldn't justify what he did.
It doesn't justify it,
but it's worse when he doesn't feel that way and then gets all performative and becomes an actor. And then, look, I just want to say this one more time. The Academy Awards has this rich tradition of hypocrisy.
Sure.
They can be righteously indignant with some people and then stand up and applaud Roman Polanski.
Well, give Roman Polanski an Oscar for Best
and
Director.
give him an Oscar
when he's on the run for molesting a 14-year-old, raping a 13-year-old girl.
Yeah. And then they're applauding him when he wins the Oscar after he commits a crime on stage.
Yeah, right.
I'm sorry, I'm calling this a crime.
Yeah.
It is undeniably a crime.
Let me ask you this. Will Smith has been trying for a year to get by this, to rehabilitate his image, to be the guy. He said all the apologies. Chris Rock has now, just to use metaphors, ripped open the Band-Aid.
Chris Rock's right.
And Chris Rock's right.
It is his right to do that.
100%. I think this is Chris Rock's, he might have but this is about it for him, right? He'll sort of milk this for a little while, but then I think he's going to stop talking about it in a month.
I think he didn't talk about it for a year.
Yeah. But so Will Smith now has the opportunity to come back, right? To your point about cancellation and the whole thing. He made a movie this year.
I don't think he ever went away.
Yeah.
I don't think he
didn't. He put out Emancipation. Unfortunately for Will Smith, I watched Emancipation about 2 weeks ago. It's just not very good. It would have been better. The subject matter is very serious. It's impactful in that way. It's not a well-made movie. I think if he has a triumphant return to some movie, and he'll get out lots of opportunities, I think it'll sort of all
but it's not about whether a movie is good or bad. Movies are good and bad all the time.
Yeah.
And, certain actors have stinkers and they have, huge hits. So I don't think it's about that. Will Smith has had his share of huge hits, and he's also had stinkers.
Yeah.
And so that's just going to continue.
Yeah.
This is not, and I'm glad this is not impairing his ability to be an actor. And I think that's really important because I got to tell you, did you see Bill Maher on Friday night?
No.
Oh my God, he talked about triggers, and this all leads to cancel culture.
Of course.
And it's the most ridiculous shit that you've ever heard when you hear what's going on college campuses that literally, I think it was Brandeis, where you can't use the word trigger because it's a trigger.
Yeah.
And they clearly didn't understand the irony of that, right? But, to talk about all of these, this is the best. There is a movie where now they have to give a warning that there is possible violence. You know what movie that is, Jason?
Every movie?
Oklahoma. Oklahoma.
With his winds come rolling down the plains?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oklahoma. It's gotten insane. And he's right. And I think this all leads to cancel culture. I think the whole thing, it's like, oh my God, look what you did to me. Look at and this kind of goes into our next subject, the last subject, which is Prince Harry.
Yeah.
And I think he suffered unspeakable trauma with the death of his mom. I think nobody,
that's his mom, yes,
nobody can
Right.
disagree with that.
Right.
And that would probably create lifelong trauma, and I get it. but there are other things. And, he did this therapy session over the weekend, and he's just getting dragged for this. He is just
The man who defends that he
getting
needs his
dragged.
privacy goes on and does a public therapy session for the world to see.
I mean, after South Park, which just hit the nail on the head, maybe he should have canceled this
He does a
for
public
$33.99.
He does a public therapy session that people can buy in for $33.99, where he talks about all of the diagnoses from his private therapy sessions. Not just enough that I'm going to air my wares here. I'm also going to tell you everything that other doctors have said about me. And in the meantime, I need to have my privacy.
This just makes no sense.
The biggest hypocrisy of the whole thing, of course, is he's asked about his victimization. Does he play the criticism that's come at him? Does he play the victim? And he says he doesn't view himself as a victim. He's never portrayed himself as a victim.
Did I miss something?
It's been the last 2 years of
victimization.
Victimization.
Right. Just victimized by William,
about how
victimized by Charles,
William choked him
victimized
and
by
broke his
Kate,
necklace.
victimized by unnamed people,
Yes.
victimized by the firm.
His children have been victimized. His wife has been victimized. He's been victimized. It's all about victimization. The fact that he can't even own that, the fact that his hypocrisy runs so deep that he can't even own that he feels like he's a victim, is absurd.
And yet, they are incredibly aggressive against the royal family. And I'm not saying the royal family is all that great.
I don't even fault him for that part of it. If he feels that way, if they whatever, he can be aggressive.
I know, but there are a lot of people who are saying, really, you want to shit on your dad this way? You want to shit on your brother this way?
Yeah.
And, the things he said about his brother, what brother hasn't done shit like that?
It's right. It's not like his brother did anything out of the ordinary from what my brother did to me and your brother did to you. It's craziness.
I mean,
it's.
Did I tell on the podcast last week the story about the judge?
Oh yes. Who? Oh no. You told that in the newsroom about the judge who called.
I'll tell you guys real quick. I mean, when I was a reporter at CBS in Los Angeles, there was a judge, and he was handling a case. It was a civil case, and I don't remember what it was, but there were celebrities involved. In the middle of the trial, said, ladies and gentlemen, counsel, I need you to stop for a minute, and I need to acknowledge somebody in the peanut gallery. Harvey Levin is sitting over there, and I just want everybody to know that when he was a kid, my brother and me would beat the crap out of him because he uncaged these pigeons that we got, and we just beat the crap out of him. And everybody just laughed. And look, I get it, that it was a different time. And this was, guys, I was like 6 years old, so this was a million years ago. And, okay.
Why'd you let the pigeons out of the cage, Harvey?
Because I was a bad kid. I was just a bad kid. And and here's the thing. I get it, and you wouldn't necessarily embrace anything like that today. You might not tout it in a courtroom, but that was a different time. I mean, first of all, Richard said this in the 90s, and secondly, this happened in the 50s. And you can't look at you cannot look at things with a 2023 lens. And Harry, look, I mean, you're no different than anybody else when it comes to your relationship with your brother. You're the same guy, even though you're a prince, as other people were. I mean, there were disputes, there were fights. It's just the shit that happens growing up.
So now the big news over the weekend, of course, is that King Charles has invited Harry and Meghan, after not inviting them forever, has now invited them to the coronation ceremony.
So was this real, or does Charles know? Well, here's the thing. At first I thought Charles knows they're not going to come. And then I thought Charles wins either way. Because if they don't come, they look petty. And if they do come, it's going to be so fucking uncomfortable.
I know.
on them.
I choose to think, and I don't know if this is true because Charles is a weird dude, but I choose to think that after long reflection, he's very angry with his son. They're very angry with Harry. The whole royal family is very angry with Harry.
Of course they are.
He said, I need to have this is the biggest moment of my life. Been waiting for 74 years or however old he is for this to happen. And
for his mom to die?
He has been. And it's awkward. But I can't not at least invite him. I choose to believe he did it out of some sort of beneficence or something. But maybe I'm being
No, look,
Pollyannish about it.
he's the king, and here's the thing: if he didn't invite him, that would show Harry got to him.
Yes.
And he doesn't want to show that Harry got to
Yeah.
him, and so he invites him. And now the question: will Harry show? What's your guess?
Well, I know that they said an immediate decision on whether the Duke and Duchess will attend will not be disclosed by us this time.
Right? Are they going to go? Is he going to go or not?
I think they go. I think at least Harry goes. I think if he doesn't go, for God's sakes, Harry, this is your family.
How
It
does
is your
Meghan? How
father's
does
biggest
Meghan?
night.
How does Meghan not go? If Harry goes,
Yeah, my guess is if I had to wager, I'd say they both go. I think there's a chance she doesn't go. She'll feign something. The kid is sick, whatever it is. But I think there's a good chance they both go. That's where I'd bet.
it's going to be so incredibly awkward. And the other thing is, we'll completely overtake the ceremony.
Yeah. By the way, we're remiss not to talk about it. We have a new podcast, Spilling Royalty,
Right.
that covers in depth all of the issues involving the royal
Sean
family.
Mandel, he knows his shit.
Sean Mandel has way more royal insider knowledge than anybody else out there. So check out Spilling Royalty. It's a new podcast from TMZ, and it is fantastic on these points.
And we will see you tomorrow.
Bye.